Welcome back, dreamer. Tonight, we descend into caverns older than empires, into halls where steam still hisses through brass pipes, where mechanical guardians pace corridors their creators will never walk again. Tonight, we explore perhaps the greatest mystery in all of Tamriel's history, the story of the Dwemer, the Deep Folk, the dwarven engineers who reached for godhood and vanished from existence itself. Chapter 1. Introduction. The Vanished Architects. Picture, if you will, a race of elves unlike any other. While their cousins, the Altmer, the Bosmer, the Khymer, looked to the heavens and worshipped gods, the Dwemer looked inward. They worshipped reason. They worshipped logic. They believed that through technology and understanding, they could rival the divine themselves. And perhaps they succeeded. Or perhaps their hubris consumed them entirely. The Dwemer, whose name translates from the Old Meris as deep folk, or people of the deep, were not merely builders or craftsmen. They were philosophers, scientists, and engineers who pushed the boundaries of what was thought possible. They harnessed steam and geothermal power. They created machines that still function thousands of years after their disappearance. They built cities that stretched beneath entire mountain ranges, connected by vast subterranean networks. They discovered and manipulated the very musical tones that underpin reality itself, a science they called tonal architecture. And then, in a single moment during the First Era, year 700, every Dwemer in existence vanished. Not died, not fled, vanished, completely and utterly removed from the world, leaving behind only their empty cities, their still functioning machines, and a mystery that has consumed scholars for millennia. What happened to them? Did they achieve their goal of transcendence? Were they destroyed by the very powers they sought to harness? Did they anger the gods they refused to worship? Or did something far stranger occur? Something that defies our understanding of existence itself? The answers, such as they are, lie scattered throughout Tamriel, in the brass halls of Blackreach, in the journals of their chief tonal architect, Kagrenac, in the ruins of Arkenthams, Mzulft, and Bethardams, in the words of the last living Dwemer, Yagrum Bagan, who survived only because he was traveling in another dimension when his entire race disappeared. Tonight, we will walk the path of the Dwemer from their earliest days to their final moment. We will explore their rise as a civilization, their incredible technological achievements, their mastery of tonal manipulation, and the events that led to their disappearance. We will examine their culture, their philosophy, their conflicts with the Khymer and the Snow Elves, and most importantly, we will try to understand what happened in that chamber deep within Red Mountain when Kagrenac struck the heart of Lorcan with his tools. The Dwemer story is not merely ancient history. It resonates through the ages, touching every aspect of Tamriel's development. The Tribunal of Morrowind achieved their godhood through the same heart the Dwemer studied. Tiber Septim conquered the Somerset Isles using the Numidium, the brass god the Dwemer created. The former, twisted and blind, still haunt the ruins of their former masters. Every delver who enters a Dwemer ruin confronts machinery that still functions, constructs that still patrol, And the persistent question, how did they build things that refuse to die? The scope of what we're about to explore is staggering. We'll descend into cities carved from living rock, walk through caverns lit by artificial stars, examine constructs that blend metal and soul in ways modern scholars cannot replicate. We'll discuss the philosophy that drove an entire race to reject divinity, the technological marvels they created in pursuit of understanding, and the catastrophic experiment that may have destroyed them or elevated them beyond our ability to perceive. We'll encounter Kagrenac's tools, Keening, Sunda, and Wraithguard, artifacts so dangerous that wielding them unprotected meant instant death. We'll explore the concept of tonal architecture, the science of manipulating reality through sound, through frequencies that existed before matter and will persist after the last star dies. We'll examine the heart of Lorcan itself, still beating in its chamber after thousands of years, still radiating the power that created Mundus. The Dwemer built an empire beneath the earth, a civilization that spanned from Morrowind to Hammerfell, from the volcanic heat of Red Mountain to the frozen peaks of Skyrim. They created wonders, self-repairing cities, tireless mechanical servants, weapons that could hold mountain passes against armies, and ultimately, a brass god designed to house their collective divine consciousness. They lived by principles of reason and logic, rejected superstition and worship, and believed that through understanding, any problem could be solved, any limitation overcome, even mortality itself. And then, in the year 700 of the First Era, during a battle in the heart chamber of Red Mountain, Kagrenac struck the heart with his hammer. The tones rang out, reality shuddered, and every Dwemer vanished, removed from existence so completely that scholars 4,000 years later still cannot determine what happened to them. Did they achieve transcendence? Were they destroyed? Did they transform into something we cannot perceive? Or did something stranger occur, something that exists outside our categories of success and failure? So settle in, dreamer. This is a long tale, spanning thousands of years and touching every corner of Tamriel. It is a story of ambition and achievement, of hubris and mystery, of a race that refused to accept limits and paid an unknowable price. It is the story of the Dwemer, Chapter 2, Origins the First, Dissidence. The story of the Dwemer begins, as all elven stories do, with the Aldmer, the first folk who inhabited the Somerset Isles in the mists of the Merethic era. But while other elven races would diverge from the Aldmer over theological or political differences, the Dwemer split for a far more fundamental reason. They rejected the very foundations of Aldmeri society. The Aldmer were a people of tradition, hierarchy, and divine worship. They venerated their ancestors, performed elaborate rituals, and structured their entire civilization around maintaining connection to the divine. They believed in preserving the purity of their bloodlines, in maintaining strict social hierarchies, in following the customs and laws handed down through countless generations. The Aldmer saw themselves as the closest living descendants of the original spirits, the Et Ada, who had existed before mortality, and they structured their entire society around maintaining that connection to divinity. But among them arose freethinkers, individuals devoted to science, engineering, and the pursuit of empirical knowledge. These dissidents found the dogma and customs of Somerset stifling. Where others saw divine mystery, they saw questions to be answered through observation and experimentation. Where others found comfort in tradition, they found only obstacles to progress and understanding. They looked at the elaborate hierarchies based on bloodline and ancestry and saw only arbitrary restrictions. They observed the religious rituals and saw wasted time that could be better spent on research and development. These intellectuals began to form communities within Aldmeri society, gathering in workshops and laboratories, sharing ideas that increasingly diverged from mainstream thought. They developed rudimentary forms of what would become Dwemer technology. Early mechanical devices, experiments with metallurgy, attempts to understand the physical principles underlying magical effects. They asked questions that made the religious authorities uncomfortable. If the Aedra created Mundus, what principles did they use? Could those principles be discovered and replicated? If divine power is simply power of greater magnitude, why should it command worship rather than study? The tension between these free thinkers and traditional Aldmeri society grew increasingly severe. The religious authorities viewed the dissidents' questions as blasphemy, their experiments as dangerous, their rejection of tradition as a threat to the very foundation of Aldmeri civilization. The freethinkers, for their part, found themselves increasingly constrained by laws and customs that seemed designed to prevent exactly the kind of inquiry they considered most important. Rather than fight to change a society fundamentally opposed to their worldview, these free-thinking Aldmer made a bold decision. They would leave. They would sail from the Somerset Isles and establish their own civilization elsewhere, one built not on faith and tradition, but on reason and discovery. This wasn't a sudden exodus, but a gradual migration, as groups of like-minded individuals organized expeditions and departed over a period of years or perhaps decades. This exodus occurred early in the Merethic era, making the Dwemer the first of the great elven migrations from Somerset. Their departure set a precedent. They demonstrated that dissidents could leave rather than submit, that alternative societies were possible. They were followed centuries later by groups like the Kema, who left for religious freedom to worship the Daedric princes, and various other splinter groups who found Aldmeri society incompatible with their own visions. But the Dwemer were the pioneers, the first to say, "We will make our own way." The Dwemer sailed north and east, eventually settling in what would become known as Morrowind, though they called their new homeland Dwemereth. Specifically, they established their first settlements in the northeastern reaches of the province, near and beneath the great volcano of Red Mountain. The choice of location was not random. The region offered several advantages that aligned perfectly with Dwemer priorities. First, the volcanic activity provided abundant geothermal energy. The Dwemer, even in these early days, understood that controlling reliable power sources was fundamental to building an advanced civilization. The heat from Red Mountain and the surrounding volcanic vents could be harnessed, channeled, used to power machinery and warm living spaces. Unlike wind or water, which were unpredictable and required surface installations, geothermal power was consistent, powerful, and available underground. Second, the region featured vast networks of natural caverns stretching deep beneath the earth. These weren't small caves, but massive underground spaces, some large enough to contain entire cities. For a people seeking to build a new civilization away from the traditions and restrictions of their homeland, these caverns were perfect. They could be expanded, modified, connected, transformed into an underground realm that would be entirely their own. To understand why the Dwemer chose to build underground, we must understand their nature and philosophy. They were not fleeing persecution exactly. They were seeking isolation from the very concepts that dominated surface life. Underground, they would be free from the capricious weather that others attributed to divine moods. No rain sent by angry gods, no droughts explained as punishment, no seasons marking time according to divine decree. Underground, the temperature could be controlled through engineering. Light could be provided by mechanisms rather than the sun. Time itself could be measured by precise mechanical clocks rather than celestial movements. Underground, they would have access to geothermal power that operated by consistent, understandable principles. There was no mystery to volcanic heat. It was simply thermal energy from the planet's molten core, energy that could be calculated, predicted, and harnessed. Underground, they could create a world that operated entirely by rules they themselves understood and controlled. Every aspect of their environment would be designed, planned, and maintained according to principles of engineering, rather than left to the randomness of nature or the whims of gods. So they delved deep. They carved elaborate cities into the living rock, using techniques that combined traditional stoneworking with early forms of tonal manipulation. They expanded natural caverns into sprawling metropolises, creating artificial spaces on scales that rivaled anything on the surface. They tapped into lava flows and hot springs for power, developing sophisticated piping systems to transport heat and steam throughout their growing cities. And they thrived in the darkness, becoming what other races would call the deep elves or deep folk, the Dwemer. But calling them dwarves was a misnomer that would persist throughout history, causing endless confusion. The Dwemer were not short. They stood as tall as any other Mir, typically between 5.5 to 6.5 feet in height. They were elves in every physical respect, distinguished from other elven races primarily by their culture and philosophy, rather than any unique physical characteristics. So where did the name dwarf come from? The name came from the giants, who first encountered the Dwemer in Skyrim and called them such in comparison to their own towering height. To a giant standing 12 or 15 feet tall, even a 6-foot Dwemer would appear diminutive. The giants, in their own language, used a term that roughly translated to dwarf or small people. The humans who heard these stories from the giants assumed dwarf meant universally short, like the mythical dwarves of their own legends, and the name stuck. By the time anyone realized the mistake, dwarven ruins and dwarven artifacts had become the standard terminology, and the true name Dwemer had faded from common knowledge. In their new underground realm, the Dwemer did not unite under a single banner or central authority. From the beginning, they were independent city-states, each ruled by reclusive clans with their own goals and motivations. Cities like Arkungthams, Bathar-Zel, Mzulft, and Ralbathar emerged as independent polities, sometimes cooperating on projects of mutual benefit, sometimes competing for resources or theoretical breakthroughs, occasionally even warring with one another over territory or philosophical disagreements. This decentralized nature was not a weakness, but a reflection of Dwemer philosophy. They believed in merit, not heredity. They valued achievement over ancestry. Their kings were not born to thrones, but rose through demonstrating capability and gaining the backing of their fellow architects and engineers. In Dwemer society, the Sangha, highest positions were occupied not by warriors or priests, but by those who contributed most to the advancement of knowledge. The tonal architects, the master craftsmen, the philosophers and mathematicians who pushed the boundaries of understanding. Each city-state developed its own character and specializations. Some focused on mining and metallurgy, others on construct design, still others on theoretical research into tonal manipulation or the nature of reality itself. This diversity of focus actually strengthened Dwemer civilization as a whole, as innovations from one city would spread to others through trade and scholarly exchange. The decentralized structure also provided resilience. No single disaster or conflict could threaten the entire Dwemer civilization, as each city maintained its own independence and capability. As they expanded, the Dwemer spread throughout northern Tamriel. They established outposts in Skyrim, where they discovered vast underground spaces perfect for their civilization, including what would become known as Black Reach. They sent expeditions to High Rock, establishing cities in the mountains and conducting trade with the early Bretons and other human populations. Some Dwemer groups even reached Hammerfell, where the Rorken clan would famously establish settlements after refusing to make peace with the Khmer in later years. Everywhere they went, they delved deep. Surface structures were rare and utilitarian, primarily trade posts or defensive positions. The real cities, the true heart of Dwemer civilization, always lay underground. They followed vertical construction principles, with cities descending through multiple levels. Upper levels housed living quarters, administrative facilities, and workshops for less dangerous work. Middle levels contained manufactories, larger workshops, and research facilities. The deeper levels were reserved for mining, heavy industry, power generation, and the most secretive or dangerous experiments. Their cities were marvels of engineering from the very beginning. Unlike surface cities that grew organically over time, expanding randomly as population increased, Dwemer settlements were planned according to rigorous principles. They employed what scholars have discovered were called the 4 tests in their city planning. The test of pattern, which required careful observation of geological features and planning of optimal layouts. The test of Archimedes, focused on practical mechanics and ensuring all systems would function as designed. The test of balance, ensuring structural integrity and stability, even in seismically active regions. And the test of work, which emphasized functionality and efficiency above all aesthetic considerations. These weren't just guidelines. They were philosophical principles that governed how the Dwemer approached everything they built. Every pipe had to serve a clear function. Every chamber needed a defined purpose. Every mechanism required justification in terms of the overall system. Beauty, when it appeared in Dwemer architecture, emerged from perfect functionality rather than decorative intent. The geometric patterns that covered Dwemer structures weren't mere ornamentation, but served purposes: load distribution, acoustic management, tonal resonance amplification. Within their underground realm, the Dwemer flourished. While they did not worship gods, they created something perhaps more enduring: a civilization built on the foundation of empirical knowledge, one that would leave artifacts and structures still functional thousands of years later. They developed a unique culture, distinct even from their Aldmeri roots. Their language, Dwemeris, diverged so completely from Aldmeris that within a few generations, the two became mutually unintelligible. Where Aldmeris retained poetic structures and forms reflecting religious concepts, Dwemeris became increasingly technical, developing specialized terminology for concepts that had no equivalents in other languages. Their early society established patterns that would persist throughout Dwemer history. Education focused on practical skills and theoretical knowledge, rather than religious or cultural instruction. Young Dwemer learned mathematics, physics, metallurgy, and engineering. Those showing particular aptitude might be apprenticed to tonal architects or master craftsmen, learning the advanced techniques that formed the foundation of Dwemer technological superiority. Social advancement came through demonstrating expertise and contributing to collective knowledge, rather than through family connections or political maneuvering. But perhaps most importantly, in those early days of settlement and expansion, they discovered something that would shape their entire destiny. Deep beneath Red Mountain, as Dwemer miners excavated ever deeper in search of valuable ores and optimal locations for geothermal taps, they would eventually discover a mysterious stone, pulsing with power, radiating divine energy unlike anything they had encountered before. A heart, not metaphorical but literal, the physical heart of the god Lorcan, cast down from the heavens in the earliest days of creation, buried beneath the mountain that formed around it. That discovery lay years or perhaps centuries in their future, but it was inevitable. The Dwemer's drive to delve deeper, to understand more, to push boundaries, would eventually lead them to that chamber. And what they found there would set in motion events that would lead to their greatest achievement and their complete disappearance from the world. Chapter 3: Culture, Philosophy and Society. Gods of Reason. To understand the Dwemer, you must first understand how fundamentally different they were from every other race in Tamriel. In a world where the existence of divine beings was not a matter of faith, but observable fact, where Daedric princes could be summoned, where Aedric blessings were tangible, where gods walked among mortals, the Dwemer alone refused to worship. This was not atheism in the traditional sense. The Dwemer did not deny that powerful beings existed. They had encountered Daedra. They knew of the Aedra, They had seen the effects of divine power, but they rejected the notion that these beings deserved worship or obedience. To the Dwemer, the so-called gods were simply beings of greater power, not fundamentally different in kind from mortals, merely different in degree. And if the difference was only one of power and understanding, then through sufficient advancement, mortals could achieve the same heights. As one Chimer account put it, the Dwemer scorned the Daedra and mocked the foolish rituals of their followers, preferring instead their gods of reason and logic. This phrase, their gods of reason and logic, has caused endless scholarly debate. Were these actual deities? Did the Dwemer secretly worship abstract principles? The truth, as far as we can determine, is both simpler and more profound. Reason and logic were not gods to be worshipped, but tools to be wielded. They were the foundational principles upon which the Dwemer built their entire civilization. Where other cultures elevated priests and warriors to positions of power, Dwemer society placed philosophers, engineers, and tonal architects at the apex of their social hierarchy. The position of high priest in Dwemer culture was not a religious role, but an academic one, held by those who had achieved the deepest understanding of the fundamental principles governing reality. Kagrenac himself held the title of High Priest alongside his role as Chief Tonal Architect, not because he led religious ceremonies, but because his theoretical and practical understanding of tonal manipulation was unmatched. This elevation of intellectual achievement over all else shaped every aspect of Dwemer society. An individual whose career focused on philosophy, mathematics, science, metallurgy, or architecture could rise to the highest positions regardless of birth or clan. Even kingship was not hereditary in Dwemer culture. Kings rose to power through the backing of the clan's tonal architects and master craftsmen, holding power through merit and achievement rather than bloodline. Any member of a clan could theoretically become its monarch if they demonstrated sufficient capability and gained the support of their peers. The structure of Dwemer society reflected this meritocratic principle. At the top were the tonal architects and master craftsmen, the individuals who pushed the boundaries of Dwemer understanding. Below them were engineers, philosophers, and skilled workers who implemented and refined the discoveries of the masters. At the bottom were those who performed more menial labor, though even these positions often involved operating or maintaining complex machinery. This is not to say the Dwemer were an egalitarian utopia. Far from it. Their society was intensely hierarchical, but the hierarchy was based on demonstrated ability rather than birth, and their treatment of non-Dwemer peoples revealed a dark pragmatism bordering on cruelty. They had minimal empathy for other races, viewing them as lesser beings at best, resources to be exploited at worst. The Dwemer kept slaves, humans, beastfolk, and even other elves, using them for labor and experimentation. The betrayal of the snow elves stands as perhaps the darkest chapter in Dwemer history. When the Falmer, fleeing from Nordic invaders, came to the Dwemer seeking shelter, they were given an ultimatum. They could stay in the underground cities, but only if they consumed a toxic fungus as part of their diet. This wasn't merely a cruel requirement. It was systematic, calculated. The fungus rendered the snow elves blind over generations. Once vulnerable and dependent, they were enslaved. What had been a proud civilization of snow elves was deliberately transformed into the twisted, blind former, serving as slaves in Dwemer workshops and mines. Why did the Dwemer do this? Various theories exist. Some scholars suggest it was pure pragmatism, a desire for a workforce that could never escape or threaten their masters. Others propose more sinister purposes, theorizing that the Dwemer were conducting some kind of long-term experiment on the farmer, studying the effects of the toxic fungi and forced adaptation to lightless environments. The fragments we have from Kelselmo stone suggest the Dwemer may have been attempting to force the Falmer into a state of sensory deprivation as part of their research into consciousness and existence. The Dwemer's relationship with religion remains one of the most complex puzzles of their culture. They had temples, but these were not places of worship in any traditional sense. Dwemer temples were research facilities dedicated to studying the higher planes of existence, Aetherius and Oblivion. They studied the Daedra not to worship them, but to understand them, to potentially harness their power. There are accounts of trade between certain Dwemer and Daedric princes, exchanges of knowledge and artifacts, though always with the Dwemer treating these transactions as business arrangements between equals rather than supplicant to deity relationships. The Chimere found this attitude deeply offensive. To them, the Dwemer's mockery of religious practice was not just disrespectful, but dangerous, an affront to the very order of the cosmos. This fundamental philosophical divide created constant tension between the two peoples who shared the land of Resdain. The Chimere believed in the guidance and protection of the Daedric princes, Azura, Boethia, and Mephala. They performed rituals, made offerings, sought divine favor. The Dwemer considered all of this superstitious nonsense, a waste of time and resources that could be better spent on research and development. This clash of worldviews extended beyond religion into approaches to magic itself. The Chimere, like most elven races, had a natural affinity for magic and saw it as a gift from the divine, something to be respected and carefully used. The Dwemer approached magic as they approached everything else, as a natural phenomenon to be studied, understood, and exploited. They weren't interested in magical tradition or mystical insight. They wanted to know the underlying mechanics, the principles that could be quantified, tested, and replicated through technology. This led to the development of what we might call magical engineering, the fusion of conventional machinery with magical principles. Dwemer soul gems weren't mystical objects, but power sources. Enchantments weren't gifts from gods, but replicable effects that could be mass-produced. Even their greatest achievement, tonal architecture, was treated not as some mystical art, but as an applied science with consistent, predictable rules. The Dwemer also developed sophisticated systems of writing and record-keeping. While many Dwemer texts were written in Old Meris for matters of trade and diplomacy, their own language of Dwemeris became increasingly specialized, filled with technical terminology that had no equivalents in other languages. They developed unique styles of written Dwemeris across different regions, suggesting not unified central control, but independent development in their various city-states. The glyphs found in Stros Mackay differ significantly from those in Morrowind, and both differ from texts discovered in Skyrim. What's remarkable is that despite thousands of years, Dwemer books and artifacts show minimal signs of wear or age. Scholars theorize the Dwemer developed some kind of preservative effect, possibly a device still functioning in their ruins that somehow arrests or slows decay. This would be entirely in keeping with their character, not accepting the natural entropy of time, but finding a way to engineer around it. In their daily lives, the Dwemer surrounded themselves with functionality and efficiency. Their furniture was often carved from stone, and while modern observers might find stone beds and chairs uncomfortable, it's possible these were originally equipped with cushions or coverings that have long since deteriorated. Their cities were lit not by flame, but by glowing crystals and powered light sources. They employed sophisticated systems for managing airflow, water distribution, and waste disposal, infrastructure so well designed that much of it continues functioning to this day. The Dwemer were, in essence, a people who had made a fundamental choice to place their faith not in gods or fate, but in their own capability. They looked at a world shaped by divine beings and said, "We can do better." They saw mysteries and sought to unravel them. They encountered limits and worked to transcend them. And ultimately, this philosophy would lead them to their greatest and most dangerous endeavor, the attempt to create their own god, powered by the heart of a dead one. Chapter 4. Technological marvels. Machines that never die stand in any Dwemer ruin today, thousands of years after the disappearance of their creators, and you will still hear the hiss of steam through pipes, the rhythmic clank of pistons, the whir of gears turning in eternal cycles. You will encounter machines that patrol the corridors, that attack intruders with lethal efficiency, that continue performing whatever tasks they were assigned millennia ago without pause, without wear, without the slightest sign of degradation. This is perhaps the most tangible evidence of Dwemer genius. They built things that refused to die. The technological achievements of the Dwemer were so far beyond anything else in Tamriel that even today, in the Fourth Era, scholars struggle to understand how they worked, much less replicate them. Calkelmo of Markarth has spent his entire career studying Dwemer artifacts, dedicated decades to translating their language and documenting their works, and he readily admits he's barely scratched the surface. The secret of Dwemer metal alone remains unsolved. No one has successfully replicated the unique alloy they used, which combines incredible strength with surprising lightness and a resistance to rust and decay that borders on the impossible. This metal, which scholars simply call dwarven metal or Dwemer metal, doesn't corrode, doesn't weaken, doesn't develop the stress fractures that eventually destroy all other known alloys. Modern smiths can work with Dwemer metal that's been salvaged from ruins, melting it down and reforming it into other items, but they cannot create more of it. The original manufacturing process, whatever it was, has been lost. Analysis of the metal suggests it's not a simple alloy, but something more complex, incorporating what could be magical principles into its very structure. The metal seems to resist entropy itself, as if the Dwemer found a way to make materials that exist partially outside normal physical laws. This would align with their mastery of tonal architecture. The metal itself may be tonally reinforced, bound together by frequencies that prevent decay at a fundamental level, though proving this theory remains beyond current capabilities. At the heart of Dwemer technology was their mastery of steam and geothermal power. They tapped into the natural heat sources beneath Tamriel, particularly the volcanic activity around Red Mountain and other geologically active regions, and channeled this thermal energy through sophisticated pipe networks that snake throughout their entire underground civilization. Steam wasn't just for power in the Dwemer system. It was integrated into virtually every aspect of their infrastructure, serving multiple purposes simultaneously. Heating systems kept living areas at comfortable temperatures, even in the deep places where natural warmth could not reach. Mechanical actuators used steam pressure to open massive doors and operate elevators. Defensive mechanisms could release scalding steam to repel intruders. Lighting systems, though not steam-powered directly, drew energy from the same geothermal sources. But the Dwemer didn't stop at harnessing steam power. They discovered ways to store and direct this power through devices that modern scholars can only describe as impossibly advanced. Dwemer batteries, which some researchers call dynamo cores, could store energy and release it in controlled ways over extended periods. Soul gems, configured in unique arrays, served not just as magical repositories, but as components in larger power distribution systems. Mysterious crystalline structures, particularly those involving Ethereum, appear to have regulated and amplified energy flow throughout their cities, creating networks of power distribution that remain stable for millennia. These systems were designed with such redundancy and self-maintenance capability that they continue functioning long after any conceivable maintenance schedule would have required intervention. Consider what this means. A Dwemer city, powered down for a few years due to some catastrophe, would gradually start itself back up as geothermal pressure built in the steam systems. Rup, the jewel of Dwemer engineering, was undoubtedly their animunculi, the animated constructs that served as guards, workers, and soldiers. These mechanical beings came in various forms, each designed for specific purposes, and all showcasing different aspects of Dwemer ingenuity. The most common were the Centurion spiders, relatively small constructs with 6 hinged legs and a flexible gas-filled dome for a body. Don't let their designation as common fool you. These machines represent engineering sophistication that would take modern scholars centuries to replicate. The gas bag component appears to be made from a material the ancient texts call flesh metal, a substance that combines properties of both organic tissue and inorganic metal in ways we still don't understand. These spiders served multiple roles: as scouts, as repair units capable of maintaining other constructs, as alarms to warn of intruders, and as first-line defenders against intrusion. More sophisticated were the Centurion spheres, aptly named for their ability to fold into a mobile sphere form approximately 1 meter in diameter. When inactive or in patrol mode, these constructs roll through Dwemer corridors on diagonal wheels, but when they detect intruders, they unfold into humanoid combat forms equipped with various weapons. Some models carried extendable swords and shields, while others, like the Centurion archers found in Bam's Amshund, were equipped with integrated crossbows. The transformation from sphere to combat form and back is a mechanical marvel, requiring precise coordination of dozens of moving parts. The spheres possessed a complex eye component, likely serving both as a targeting system and as a gyroscope to maintain balance. When idle, the body could retract completely inside the sphere, with the shield forming a protective cap. The precision required for this transformation, the ability to fold a humanoid form into a perfect sphere, maintain combat readiness, then deploy in seconds, represents engineering prowess that surpasses anything achieved before or since. At the apex of Dwemer military technology were the steam Centurions, massive humanoid constructs designed as heavy combat units. Standing far taller than a human, these armored warriors featured a spring-loaded battle axe on one arm and a three-fingered manipulator hand on the other, along with the ability to release devastating blasts of scalding steam. They were the most powerful, most advanced constructs the Dwemer created, and encountering one even thousands of years after their construction is a potentially fatal experience. The book Ruins of Kemel Z suggests these constructs had a weakness to frost and magic due to the water and steam that powered them. However, actual encounters with them tell a different story. They prove remarkably resistant to magical attacks, frost included. This discrepancy itself is interesting, suggesting either evolution in Centurion design or fundamental misunderstandings in historical accounts. All of these animunculi appear to be powered by a combination of mechanical systems, geothermal energy, and soul gems of varying sizes. The spiders typically housed petty soul gems. The spheres used lesser or common souls, while the massive Centurions were powered by grand or greater soul gems. When destroyed, these constructs often release a burst of energy as their power source discharges, a final danger from machines long since deactivated. One of the most fascinating aspects of Dwemer constructs is their apparent connection to their place of origin. Centurions removed from Vardenfell beyond a certain distance simply shut down, becoming inert. When brought back within range of Red Mountain, they reactivate. This suggests the animunculi were connected to some kind of signal or energy field emanating from the Dwemer's underground colonies. Whether this was intentional, a security measure to prevent constructs from being used against the Dwemer themselves, or an inherent limitation of their design, remains unknown. Beyond their military applications, the Dwemer created numerous specialized constructs and devices. Dwarven turtles served as cargo carriers. Dwarven ballistae provided stationary defense. The massive dynasters functioned as mobile deployment platforms, capable of housing and transporting multiple Centurion spheres. There were even attempts at creating flying constructs, though these seem to have been less successful than their ground-based cousins. The Dwemer also created more subtle technological marvels. Their lexicons were devices that allowed for the Chots reading of Elder Scrolls without the madness or blindness that typically afflicted those who attempted such a feat. These weren't simple containers, but active devices that somehow interfaced between the incomprehensible complexity of an Elder Scroll and the mind attempting to understand it. The ocularies represented another pinnacle of Dwemer engineering. These massive constructs, found in locations like Mzulft and the Tower of Mzark, served various complex functions. The oculary in Mzulft was designed to collect and transmute starlight, projecting it onto a map of Tamriel to reveal locations of great magical power. The one in the Tower of Mzark was built to store and protect objects of immense importance, like the Elder Scroll housed there. Both required precise calibration with focusing crystals, demonstrating the Dwemer's sophisticated understanding of optics, energy manipulation, and magical principles. Tonal resonators were another remarkable technology, creating specific sound frequencies that could unlock doors, activate mechanisms, and affect the minds of those nearby. When properly tuned, these devices could induce states ranging from deep calm to paranoia and terror in lesser Miu and men. The implications of this: technology capable of directly manipulating consciousness through sound, suggest the Dwemer understood connections between physics, sound, and consciousness that we have yet to rediscover. The Dwemer even created functional airships. During Tiber Septim's conquest in the Second Era, historical accounts describe the use of a working Dwemer airship at Stros Makai, piloted by Amiel Richten in an attempted escape. Though the ship was ultimately destroyed by Cyrus, its very existence confirmed that the Dwemer had achieved powered flight, a feat unmatched by any other civilization in Tamriel's history. Perhaps most impressively, all of this technology was created without the benefit of modern metallurgical knowledge, without electricity as we understand it, without precision manufacturing equipment beyond what they could build themselves. Every gear, every pipe, every complex mechanism was crafted by Dwemer hands, using techniques we can study, but not replicate. And undergirding all of this was infrastructure that remains functional millennia later. Dwemer ruins still have working lighting systems. Pressure plates still trigger traps. Elevators still function. This wasn't merely good engineering. This was engineering that accounted for the complete absence of maintenance, that anticipated operating for thousands of years without any intervention. The Dwemer built not just for their own time, but for eternity. Chapter 5: Tonal Architecture, the Music of Creation. If we are to understand what truly set the Dwemer apart, what enabled their greatest achievements and potentially caused their ultimate fate, we must delve into their most sophisticated science: tonal architecture. This was not merely technology. This was not just engineering. Tonal architecture was nothing less than the manipulation of the fundamental forces that undergird reality itself. To grasp this concept, we must first understand the Dwemer's view of existence. They believed, or perhaps more accurately, they discovered through empirical research, that all of reality is fundamentally based on sound. Not sound as we typically think of it, but cosmic vibrations, frequencies, and harmonics that existed before and beyond conventional matter. In Dwemer philosophy, everything that exists is part of a grand cosmic song, a music that began with the creation of the orbis itself and continues in every moment, in every action, in every existence. This wasn't mysticism to the Dwemer, but observable, quantifiable fact. The original sound was made with the creation of the Orbis, and it spans over all existence. Everything in the cosmos is part of this music and inevitably contributes to it by creating events, by taking actions, by simply existing. Each adds its own notes to the universal symphony. At the heart of this music was Lorcan, the doom drum in Old Meris, so named because he incited the greatest changes in the cosmic song. His heartbeat became the rhythm around which all of Mundus revolves. The Elder Scrolls themselves, those incomprehensible artifacts that exist outside normal time, serve as recorders of this music, collecting the songs for Magnus, the god of magic who fled creation. The Dwemer discovered that this wasn't just poetic metaphor, but literal truth. Sound wasn't just something that traveled through air. It was the mechanism by which reality was constructed and could be altered. And if you understood the frequencies, the harmonics, the tones that underlay creation, you could add to the song, interrupt it, or change it entirely. Tonal architecture, then, was the applied science of manipulating these cosmic frequencies. A tonal architect wasn't simply an engineer or even a mage. They were individuals who could perceive and manipulate the fundamental vibrations of reality. They were composers writing new verses into the cosmic symphony, builders who didn't just work with stone and metal, but with the very tones that defined existence. The practical applications of tonal architecture were staggering. At its most basic level, it could be used in construction and engineering. Dwemer ruins contain massive tonal resonators, enormous machines composed of pipes, dials, and pistons that reached from floor to ceiling of cavernous chambers. When activated, these resonators released powerful tones that could shape stone, reinforce structures, and create edifices that stood far longer and stronger than conventional building techniques would allow. This is why Dwemer ruins remain so remarkably intact thousands of years later. They were constructed not just physically, but tonally, reinforced at a fundamental level. Tonal architecture could also serve as a mining tool, able to shatter specific types of rock while leaving others intact, allowing for precise excavation. Medical applications existed as well. Certain tones could heal, though others could harm. The resonators could be synchronized with the mind, inducing specific mental states or blocking others. Imagine technology that could directly affect consciousness simply by playing the right combination of frequencies. But the true power and danger of tonal architecture lay in its most advanced applications. The Dwemer theorized that if you understood the tones deeply enough, you could fundamentally alter the nature of existence. You could change not just what things were, but what they could be. You could potentially even reverse what they called subgradient devolution, the process by which the El Nofe, the original spirits of creation, had diminished into mortals. This was the Dwemer's ultimate goal, to escape the limitations of mortality, not through prayer or worship, but through understanding and manipulating the fundamental tones of existence. They sought to become something greater, equal to or surpassing the Et Oda themselves, not as a gift from gods, but as an achievement of their own capability. Kagrenac, the chief tonal architect, dedicated his life to this pursuit, His title wasn't merely honorific. It marked him as the most knowledgeable individual in Dwemer society regarding tonal manipulation. And when Dwemer miners discovered the heart of Lorcan beneath Red Mountain, Kagrenac recognized an opportunity unlike any before. The heart wasn't just a relic or an artifact. It was a divine organ, still beating, still radiating immense power, still producing its cosmic tones. It was, quite literally, the doom drum itself, the rhythm around which Mundus revolved. And if one could tap into those tones, manipulate them, harmonize with them, the possibilities were limitless. Kagrenac created 3 tools specifically for this purpose, artifacts that would become legendary: Keening, Sunder, and Wraithguard. These weren't weapons in any conventional sense, though they could certainly be used to deadly effect. They were precision instruments designed for tonal manipulation at the highest possible level. Sunder, the hammer, was designed to strike the heart and produce specific tones, like a tuning fork of cosmic proportions. Keening, the blade, could then manipulate and refine those tones, adjusting frequencies with incredible precision. But both tools were far too dangerous to wield directly. The energies involved would destroy anyone who tried to use them unprotected. Thus, Wraithguard, the gauntlet, which served as both protection and interface, allowing a mortal to safely channel the immense power required for this work. The theory behind Kagrenac's plan was complex, even by Dwemer standards. He believed that by striking the heart with the proper tones, he could tap into its power not just as an energy source, but as a means of fundamental transformation. The heart could serve as a crux of transcendence, a focal point through which the entire Dwemer race could be elevated beyond mortality. They called this achieving the divine skin, becoming something beyond what they had been, transcending the limitations that bound them to Mundus. To house and channel this transformation, Kagrenac designed the Numidium, the brass god, a construct of such immense scale and complexity that it defied description. But more on that monumental creation later. The danger of tonal architecture, even Kagrenac understood, lay in its precision. The cosmic song had infinite complexity. A single wrong tone, a frequency just slightly off, and the results could be catastrophic. It was like performing surgery on reality itself. Success required perfect understanding and execution, and failure. Failure might mean destruction, transformation into something unrecognizable, or perhaps something even stranger. Kagrenac's theories were recorded in his book, Divine Metaphysics, though the text is nearly incomprehensible to those without deep understanding of tonal architecture. Even Yagrum Bagan, the last living Dwemer and one of Kagrenac's own tonal architects, claims he could spend hours explaining the theories and still convey only a fraction of their meaning. What we know is that Kagrenac believed he had discovered something profound, a way to use tonal manipulation not just to affect the physical world, but to alter the very nature of existence for the entire Dwemer race. His plan involved the 15-1 golden tones mentioned in Dunmeri records, specific frequencies that, when properly applied to the heart, could achieve the impossible. The relationship between tonal architecture and the concept of Chim is worth noting here. though it ventures into speculative territory. Chim is a state of enlightenment in which an individual realizes they are part of the cosmic dream, but maintains their individual identity despite that realization. Some scholars theorize that Kagrenac's ultimate goal was to achieve a form of collective Chim for the entire Dwemer race, using the heart as a focal point. If this is true, it would explain both the ambition and the danger of his work. There are parallels between Dwemer tonal architecture and other forms of advanced magical understanding in Tamriel. The Psijic Order's understanding of the old ways touches on similar principles. The Thuum used by the ancient Nords is fundamentally tonal magic, using voice to impose will upon reality. Even Dunmeri ancestral worship involves a form of tonal manipulation, though they would never describe it in such terms. The Dwemer, however, approached these forces not as gifts from gods or mystical traditions passed down, but as sciences to be quantified and exploited. The creation of their animunculi likely involved tonal principles as well. While powered by soul gems and mechanical systems, there are suggestions that certain tonal frequencies were built into their construction, helping to maintain their function across millennia. The way Centurions cease functioning when removed too far from Red Mountain suggests they may have been attuned to specific frequencies emanating from the heart or from tonal resonators placed throughout the underground network. The implications of tonal architecture extend far beyond what the Dwemer achieved. If sound truly is the basis of reality, if the cosmic song can be manipulated by those with sufficient understanding, then the Dwemer weren't just engineers. They were composers rewriting the fundamental nature of existence. Every structure they built, every construct they created, every experiment they performed was adding new verses to reality's music. And when Kagrenac finally struck the heart of Lorcan with his tools, when he attempted to play his ultimate composition, the result was a note that changed everything. Whether it was the wrong tone, the right tone, with catastrophic consequences, or something beyond our understanding entirely, that moment marked the end of the Dwemer presence in Mundus. But before we can understand that final moment, we must explore the world the Dwemer built for themselves, the magnificent underground cities that became their homes, their laboratories, and ultimately their tombs. Chapter 6: Major Cities and the Marvel of Blackreach. The Dwemer did not build cities as other races understood them. They built ecosystems, vast interconnected networks stretching beneath mountains and deserts, through volcanic rock and frozen tundra. Each city was both independent and connected, a node in a web of underground civilization that spanned much of northern Tamriel. In Morrowind, the heart of Dwemer civilization, numerous cities dotted the landscape beneath Vardenfell and the mainland. Bam's Amshant lay beneath Mournhold, the capital of Morrowind itself. This juxtaposition, Dwemer ruins literally beneath the seat of Dunmer power, serves as a constant reminder that the deep folk were there first, that modern civilization rests on ancient foundations. Arkangthums was one of the great cities, home to Catria, the scholar who spent her life studying Ethereum, the rare and mysterious crystalline material that the Dwemer prized above all others. Her research led her to the Ethereum Forge, a marvel of Dwemer engineering capable of working with this nearly indestructible substance. The forge itself represented a pinnacle of their metallurgical knowledge, using geothermal heat sources in combination with tonal manipulation to achieve temperatures and conditions impossible through conventional means. Thardams in the Reach served as one of the primary population centers, its vast halls capable of housing thousands. Like all Dwemer cities, it featured multiple levels descending deeper and deeper into the earth, with upper levels for living and administration, middle levels for workshops and research, and deeper levels for mining, power generation, and more secretive work. The architecture followed the distinctive Dwemer style, angular, geometric, emphasizing function while achieving a strange beauty through pure utility. Mzulft, located in the mountains of Eastmarch, housed one of their great ocularies. This wasn't merely an observatory, but a device for detecting and mapping sources of magical power across all of Tamriel. The precision required to create such a device, one that could collect starlight, filter it through specific crystals, and project the results onto a three-dimensional map, demonstrates the sophistication of Dwemer astronomical and magical understanding. Ralpthar, Alftand, Irkungthand. Each of these cities had its own character, its own purpose within the greater Dwemer civilization. Some focused on research, others on manufacturing, still others on food production, using the strange luminescent fungi that grew in the deep places. Yet all shared common elements: the ever-present sound of steam and machinery, the geometric precision of their construction, and the intricate pipe networks that connected them to central power sources. But no Dwemer city can compare to Blackreach, the single most magnificent achievement of their civilization, a wonder that rivals anything built on the surface of Tamriel. Blackreach is not merely a city. It is an entire subterranean realm, a vast cavern system so immense that it has its own sky, or rather, a ceiling so far above that it appears as a sky dotted with enormous glowing crystals that serve as artificial stars. Standing in Blackreach, you would not think yourself underground. You would think you had somehow entered another world entirely. The cavern stretches for miles in every direction, with multiple Dwemer cities contained within its borders. Alftand, Mzinchaleft, and Ralthar all connect to Blackreach, as do numerous smaller outposts and research facilities. Rivers flow through it, fed by underground springs. Waterfalls cascade from heights lost in darkness. Strange luminescent plants grow in the perpetual twilight, having adapted to life without sunlight over countless millennia. The scale of Blackreach defies comprehension. To excavate such a space, to reinforce it against collapse, to establish the infrastructure necessary to support multiple cities within it, this was engineering on a level that surpasses even the greatest surface civilizations. The amount of planning, the precision of execution, the sheer ambition required to create Blackreach speaks to the Dwemer's refusal to accept limits. At the center of Blackreach stands one of the most mysterious structures in all of Dwemer civilization, the massive glowing orange sphere suspended in the air, eternally hovering through means unknown. Some scholars theorize it's a massive tonal resonator. Others suggest it's related to the ocular lorries found in other ruins. Still others believe it may have been part of the infrastructure designed to channel power from the heart of Lorcan throughout the underground network. Scattered throughout Blackreach are Dwemer farms where they cultivated the luminescent fungi that served as a food source. These weren't simple mushroom patches, but sophisticated agricultural installations, carefully managing the growth, harvest, and processing of multiple fungal species. The Dwemer apparently developed varieties with different nutritional properties, some for general consumption, others with specific medicinal or narcotic effects. The Falmer, who were enslaved by the Dwemer, worked these farms, and evidence suggests the blinding fungus that transformed them may have been one of these cultivated varieties. Whether the blindness was an unintended side effect or a deliberate feature remains a subject of dark speculation among scholars. What we know is that the Falmer's dependency on the fungus became complete, and even after the Dwemer disappeared, the Falmer continued consuming it, ensuring their blindness persisted through countless generations. Blackreach also housed numerous research facilities, their purposes often mysterious. Laboratories filled with alchemical equipment, astronomical observation posts, tracking movements of heavenly bodies from deep underground, large chambers whose purpose remains completely unknown. In some areas, the walls themselves seem to resonate with residual tonal energy, suggesting experiments in tonal architecture were conducted on scales we can barely imagine. The city of Mzinchaleft, within Blackreach, appears to have been a center of construct production. The density of centurions and spheres in its halls surpasses most other Dwemer ruins, and workshop areas contain what appear to be partially assembled animunculi, frozen in mid-construction when their creators vanished. Transportation throughout Blackreach was accomplished through a combination of bridges, elevators, and what can only be described as rapid transit systems. Massive mechanical lifts could carry dozens of Dwemer between levels. Some structures suggest the use of controlled flooding, water-powered elevators using counterweights and precisely engineered locks. The sophistication of these systems, all powered by geothermal energy and designed to function indefinitely without maintenance, represents engineering prowess unmatched in Tamriel's history. Beyond Blackreach and the major cities, smaller Dwemer outposts and ruins dot the landscape of Skyrim, Morrowind, High Rock, and even Hammerfell. The Rorcan clan, who refused to make peace with the Chimer, struck out westward. Legend holds that their chief threw his hammer, Volendrung, and vowed to settle wherever it landed. The hammer supposedly flew across the continent, eventually landing in what would become Hammerfell, where the Rorcan established their own cities. The Tower of Mizark deserves special mention. This structure, accessible from both Blackreach and the surface, served multiple purposes. It housed an Elder Scroll within a specialized oculary designed specifically to protect such artifacts. It also appears to have been an observation post for studying the stars and planets from an optimal vantage point. The mechanisms within the tower are among the most complex found in any Dwemer ruin, requiring precise calibration with multiple focusing crystals to unlock the oculary and access the Elder Scroll within. All of these cities, all of these structures, share certain characteristics. They show clear evidence of the four tests: pattern, Archimedes, balance, and work in their design. They incorporate extensive use of geometric patterns, both for structural reasons and apparently for aesthetic ones, though the Dwemer concept of beauty was inherently tied to function. They maintain environmental controls that keep temperature and humidity within specific ranges, even thousands of years later. And they all connect, ultimately, to the network of passages and tunnels that linked the entire Dwemer civilization into one vast underground empire. When the Dwemer vanished, these cities didn't fall into ruin. They simply continued operating, their machines carrying out tasks for masters who would never return. The light stayed on, the steam kept flowing, the constructs kept patrolling, and in the darkness of Blackreach, beneath the glow of artificial stars, the greatest achievement of Dwemer architecture stands eternal and empty, a testament to a people who tried to remake the world in the image of reason. Chapter 7: Relations with Other Races. Alliance, Slavery, and War. The Dwemer did not exist in isolation. Though they built their cities deep underground, away from the surface world they disdained, they could not entirely avoid contact with other races. These interactions reveal much about Dwemer character: their pragmatism, their sense of superiority, their capacity for both diplomacy and cruelty. The most significant and complex relationship was with the Khymer, the other major Eni-Isar population in Resdain, the land that would eventually become Morrowind. The Khymer had left Somerset for different reasons than the Dwemer. They sought religious freedom to worship the Daedric princes Azura, Boethia, and Mephala, whom they called the Anticipations. Where the Dwemer rejected divine worship entirely, the Khymer embraced it, making them philosophical opposites from the very beginning. For centuries, this fundamental difference created tension between the two peoples. The Khymer were horrified by the Dwemer's mockery of religion and their arrogant dismissal of divine power. The Dwemer found the Khymer's worship superstitious and their devotion to the Daedra a waste of resources. Skirmishes and border conflicts were common, though full-scale war was avoided for generations. Despite this tension, there was also significant interaction. Trade occurred between the two peoples. The Dwemer had goods and technology the Khmer desired, and the Khmer controlled surface resources and trade routes. Some Dwemer cities maintained diplomatic relations with Khmer houses. There are even suggestions in some texts that individual Dwemer and Khmer formed friendships or partnerships, though this would have been deeply controversial on both sides. The establishment of the First Council marked a period of formal cooperation. This alliance, bringing together the great Khmer houses under the leadership of Lord Indoril Nerevar and the Dwemer city-states under King Dumac Dwarf King, represented an attempt to unite the peoples of Resdain against external threats, particularly the expanding Nordic Empire. For a time, this alliance held strong. Nerevar and Dumas reportedly became close friends, with Dumas even gifting Nerevar a powerful blade as a symbol of their bond. But tensions remained beneath the surface cooperation. The Khmer's spiritual leader, Vorin Dagoth, later known as Dagoth Ur, harbored deep suspicions about Dwemer activities beneath Red Mountain. His concerns were not entirely unfounded. Kagrenac was indeed conducting research into the heart of Lorcan, research that the Kaimer would consider blasphemous if they knew its full extent. The Dwemer's treatment of the Snow Elves stands as perhaps the darkest chapter in their history and provides the clearest window into their capacity for calculated cruelty. The former had been a proud civilization in Skyrim during the Merethic era, but Nordic expansion drove them to desperation. When they sought refuge with the Dwemer, they were given a cruel choice: accept the Dwemer's terms or face extinction at the hands of the Nords. The terms were insidious. The Snow Elves could stay in Dwemer cities, safe from Nordic aggression, but they had to consume a specific toxic fungus. The Dwemer presented this as a simple dietary requirement, perhaps even a religious rite of passage. In reality, it was a slow poison that caused blindness over generations. Once the former became dependent on the fungus and lost their sight, they became vulnerable, easily enslaved. The transformation of the former from a civilized mare race into the twisted, blind creatures that haunt Dwemer ruins today was not accidental. It was systematic, calculated, and executed over generations. The Dwemer used the former as slave labor in their deepest mines, in their fungus farms, in any task that required numbers rather than skill. They kept the former in perpetual darkness, fed them only the fungus that had blinded them, and allowed them to devolve into something barely recognizable as the Snow Elves they had been. Why did the Dwemer do this? Several theories exist. The most charitable interpretation is pure pragmatism. They needed labor, and the desperate former provided it. Less charitable theories suggest that Dwemer were conducting long-term experiments on the former, studying the effects of forced adaptation, sensory deprivation, and genetic drift over generations. The most disturbing theory proposes that the Dwemer saw it as a form of mercy. Better to exist as blind slaves than to be exterminated by the Nords. Whatever their motivation, the result was genocide of a different kind. The Snow Elves were not killed, but transformed into something else entirely. Their culture destroyed, their history forgotten, their very identity erased. When the Dwemer vanished, the former remained, continuing to devolve in the darkness, becoming the hostile creatures that now infest every Dwemer ruin. In a sense, the Dwemer's cruelty to the farmer outlasted the Dwemer themselves. Relations with the Nords were primarily hostile. The Nords saw the Dwemer as unnatural creatures living in unholy places beneath the earth. The Dwemer saw the Nords as superstitious barbarians clinging to primitive beliefs and violent conquest. Conflicts erupted regularly wherever Dwemer territory bordered Nordic holdings. The Nords learned to fear Dwemer constructs, which could hold mountain passes against vastly superior numbers of Nordic warriors. There are accounts of the Nords using the Thuum, their voice magic, against Dwemer fortifications with some success. The Dwemer, in turn, studied the Thuum, not out of respect for the tradition, but in an attempt to understand and replicate it through technology. Some scholars believe certain tonal resonators were designed specifically as countermeasures against Nordic voice magic, though this remains speculation. The giants, who gave the Dwemer their misleading name, had limited interaction with them. The giants called the Dwemer dwarves simply because they were smaller than giants themselves, not because the Dwemer were actually short by the standards of other races. This linguistic misunderstanding would persist through history, causing endless confusion for scholars who expected to find evidence of a diminutive race. Interactions with humans varied. The Dwemer traded with some human settlements, particularly in High Rock, where evidence suggests ongoing commercial relationships. These exchanges introduced Dwemer goods into the wider economy of Tamriel, though the Dwemer were careful never to share the secrets of their manufacture. To the Dwemer, other races might be useful as trade partners or labor sources, but they were never considered equals worthy of shared knowledge. The Khajiit, Argonians, and other beast races had minimal contact with the Dwemer, though those captured in conflicts or trade sometimes ended up as slaves in Dwemer cities. The Dwemer appeared to have made no distinction between the various races in their treatment of slaves. All non-Dwemer were simply resources to be exploited. Within Dwemer society itself, slavery was an accepted institution. Beyond the farmer, they kept human slaves, captured beast folk, and occasionally enslaved members of other elven races. These slaves performed menial labor that the Dwemer preferred not to waste their own time on, freeing Dwemer citizens to focus on research, engineering, and philosophical pursuits. The moral implications of slavery don't appear to have troubled the Dwemer. It was simply logical resource allocation. This attitude extended to their willingness to experiment on other races. Evidence from various ruins suggests the Dwemer conducted medical, alchemical, and potentially tonal experiments on enslaved individuals. The nature of these experiments remains unclear, as the Dwemer's record-keeping was in their own language, and much has been lost or remains untranslated. But the infrastructure found in some ruins, restraining devices, operating chambers, equipment whose purpose is disturbingly unclear, paints a grim picture. The internal politics of the Dwemer were equally complex. The various city-states maintained independence, though they shared language, culture, and goals. Disputes between cities were resolved through councils of tonal architects and clan leaders. When the Rorcan clan refused to accept peace with the Chimera, they were not exiled or punished, but allowed to leave and establish their own settlements in the West. This suggests a level of autonomy and respect for individual clan decisions that might seem at odds with their treatment of other races. The key to understanding Dwemer relations with other peoples lies in their fundamental belief in their own superiority. This wasn't mere arrogance. To the Dwemer, it was observable fact. They had achieved technological and philosophical advancement beyond any other race. They understood principles of physics, sound, and reality that others couldn't even conceive. Why should such beings treat lesser races as equals? This attitude, combined with their rejection of divine authority and moral frameworks based on religious teaching, meant the Dwemer operated by a pure logic that sometimes led to actions other races found horrifying. They were not evil in any conventional sense. They were simply pragmatic to a degree that erased empathy for those they considered lesser beings. When the moment of their disappearance came, these complex relationships would leave lasting scars on Tamriel. The Chimera would be transformed into the Dwemer, cursed by Azura for the actions of their tribunal. The former would continue their devolution in the darkness, and the empty Dwemer cities would become contested territory, their secrets sought by every race that had once feared or hated their creators. Chapter 8. The Heart of Lorkhan and Kagrenac's Vision. Deep beneath Red Mountain, in chambers carved from volcanic rock and reinforced by tonal architecture, the Dwemer made a discovery that would define their final chapter. They found the literal heart of a god. To understand the significance of this discovery, we must briefly step back to the earliest days of creation. In the beginning, according to Tamriel's oldest myths, there existed the Orbis, the totality of everything, including potential existence itself. Within this primordial reality, spirits called the Aeda came into being. These original spirits were not mortal, not limited by the constraints that would later define physical existence. Among these spirits was Lorkhan, known by many names across Tamriel: Shazar to the Imperials, Shor to the Nords, the missing god to some, the Doom Drum to the Aldmer. Lorkhan looked upon the unchanging eternity of the Orbis and had a vision. Mundus, the mortal plane, a realm where change was possible, where time flowed, where the eternal spirits could become something different. To create Mundus required sacrifice. The Aeda, who participated in its creation, who would become known as the Aedra, poured their divine essence into the world. This process diminished them fundamentally, transforming eternal spirits into beings bound by the limitations of physical reality. The Daedric princes, by contrast, refused to participate and retain their full divine power, though they were forever barred from direct influence over Mundus. When the Aedra realized what Lorkhan had done, that creation of Mundus had cost them their full divine nature, many were furious. They blamed Lorkhan for tricking them into this diminishment. At a mythic moment called Convention, held at the Adamantine Tower, the first structure on Mundus, the Aedra held judgment on Lorkhan. Trinamac, the greatest warrior among the Aedra, tore out Lorkhan's heart. Oriel, the Old Mary name for Akatosh, shot it from his bow like an arrow, sending it flaming across the continent to land in what would become Morrowind. Where it fell, the earth rose up around it, creating Red Mountain, the great volcano at the center of Vardenfell. The heart itself, still beating, still radiating divine power, became buried deep beneath the mountain. For ages, the heart remained hidden, its presence known only in legend, in the myths passed down by the Chimera about the missing god and his punishment. Then Dwemer miners, excavating ever deeper into the root of Red Mountain, broke through into a chamber that had remained sealed since the world was young. And there they found it, a physical organ, approximately the size of a small building, floating in space, eternally beating, radiating heat and power and strange harmonics that resonated through the very fabric of reality. The discovery was reported to the clans, and soon every tonal architect in Dwemer society knew of it. For the Dwemer, this wasn't a religious artifact demanding worship. It was an opportunity. Here was a direct connection to the tones, that had created Mundus, a divine power source of literally limitless potential, a key that might unlock transformation beyond anything they had previously imagined. Kagrenac, the chief tonal architect, became obsessed with the heart. He studied it for years, listening to its rhythms, analyzing the frequencies it produced, developing theories about how its power could be tapped. He came to understand that the heart wasn't just radiating power randomly. It was producing specific tones, the fundamental frequencies that had been present at creation, the notes around which all of Mundus was built. His vision was audacious even by Dwemer standards. He believed that by using tonal manipulation on the heart, he could achieve what the Dwemer had always sought: transcendence beyond mortality, transformation into something greater, but not just for himself, for the entire Dwemer race simultaneously. Every Dwemer, in every city, across all of northern Tamriel, would be elevated in a single moment, achieving the divine skin they had worked toward for generations. To accomplish this, Kagrenac designed and created 3 artifacts: Keening, Sunder, and Wraithguard. These tools were not merely physical objects, but tonal instruments of incredible precision, each serving a specific purpose in the process of manipulating the heart. Sunder was a hammer, but calling it merely a hammer vastly understates its function. When struck against the heart, Sunder would produce specific tones, like a tuning fork designed for cosmic frequencies. These tones would resonate with the heart's own rhythms, creating harmonic interference patterns that could be manipulated and controlled. Keening was a blade, but it wasn't designed to cut physical matter. Its purpose was to refine and adjust the tones produced by Sunder, to make minute adjustments to the frequencies with surgical precision. Where Sunder provided the bass notes, Keening shaped them into exactly the right harmonics for the transformation Kagrenac envisioned. Both tools, however, were too dangerous to use directly. The energies involved, divine power channeled through tonal manipulation, would destroy any mortal who attempted to wield them unprotected. Thus, Wraithguard, a gauntlet that served both as protection and as an interface. It allowed the wearer to safely channel the immense power required to maintain connection with the tools while insulating them from the destructive forces they were manipulating. To house and channel the transformation Kagrenac envisioned, he designed something unprecedented: the new medium, which deserves its own discussion. But the tools and the brass god were all part of a single unified plan to use the heart of Lorcan as a crux of transcendence, a focal point through which the Dwemer could remake themselves into something greater. Kagrenac's theories were documented in his book, Divine Metaphysics, though the text is nearly incomprehensible to anyone without deep understanding of tonal architecture. Even Yagrum Bagan, one of Kagrenac's own tonal architects, admitted he could spend hours trying to explain the theories and still convey only a fraction of their meaning. The concepts involved: the 15-1 golden tones, the 6-1 walking ways, the process of achieving the divine skin, were so abstract and technical that they existed at the very limits of language's ability to express them. What we know is that Kagrenac believed he had discovered a way to use the heart not merely as a power source, but as a mechanism for fundamental transformation. By striking it with sunder in precisely the right way, by shaping those tones with keening, by channeling everything through Wraithguard, he could create a moment of cosmic resonance. In that moment, every Dwemer in existence would be transformed, transcending mortality and joining together into something greater. The plan, however, was deeply heretical to the Chimera. When Vorin de Goth, serving as Nerevar's trusted advisor and guardian of the heart's location, discovered what Kagrenac was planning, he was horrified. The Dwemer weren't just studying a divine artifact. They were planning to use it, to tap into the power of a god for their own purposes. To the deeply religious Chimera, this wasn't just arrogance, it was blasphemy of the highest order. Dagoth reported his findings to Nerevar, who confronted his friend Dwemer. The Dwemer king either didn't know the full extent of what Kagrenac was doing, or refused to stop it, believing in the right of the Dwemer to pursue their research wherever it led. The First Council, the alliance that had united the Chimera and Dwemer, shattered in that moment. War became inevitable, but Kagrenac continued his work even as armies gathered. He refined his tools, perfected his calculations, prepared for the moment when he would strike the heart and transform his entire race. Time was running out. The Chimera armies were coming, and Nerevar was determined to stop whatever blasphemy the Dwemer were committing beneath Red Mountain. In the deepest chambers, in the presence of the beating heart, Kagrenac made his final preparations. The tools were ready. The tones had been calculated. The moment of transformation was at hand. Whether he succeeded or failed, whether what happened next was triumph or catastrophe, would be determined by the accuracy of his understanding and the precision of his execution. And then, in the heat of battle, as Nerevar's forces breached the final defenses and poured into the chamber, Kagrenac struck the heart with sunder. The tones rang out. Reality itself shuddered, and in that instant, every Dwemer in existence vanished from Mundus, leaving behind only their empty cities, their still functioning machines, and questions that would haunt Tamriel for millennia. Chapter 9. The Numidium, the brass god. If the heart of Lorcan was the power source, and the tools were the mechanism, then the Numidium was the vessel, the ultimate expression of everything the Dwemer had worked toward, a construct so massive and powerful that it defied categorization. Was it a machine, a weapon, a god? In truth, it was all of these and none of them, something that existed beyond conventional definitions. The Numidium towered hundreds of feet high, a brass titan constructed in the image of a man, but on a scale that made the largest centurions look like children's toys. Its creation required the resources of multiple Dwemer city-states, thousands of workers, and the application of every principle of tonal architecture the Dwemer had mastered. It was not merely their greatest technological achievement. It was the culmination of their entire civilization's purpose. To understand what the Numidium was meant to be, we must first understand what it actually was: a reality-denying construct, a machine with the power to impose its will upon existence itself. The Dwemer called it Anumidium, the world engine, though later scholars would corrupt this to Numidium. Its purpose, as designed by Kagrenac, was to serve as a vessel for the collective consciousness of the Dwemer race after their transformation through the heart of Lorcan. The plan as far as scholars can piece together, was this. When Kagrenac struck the heart with sunder and shaped the tones with keening, the resulting transformation would elevate every Dwemer beyond mortality. But rather than scattering their elevated consciousness across the orbis, the new medium would serve as an anchor, a focal point that would house and channel their collective divine nature. In essence, the Dwemer would become a god, and the new medium would be its physical form. The construct's design reflected this audacious purpose. Every system, every component, every brass plate and pipe network was integrated into a unified whole, designed to channel divine power. The new medium wasn't powered by conventional means. It was designed to draw energy directly from the heart of Lorcan, connected through tonal resonances that would allow it to tap into essentially unlimited power. But the Dwemer vanished before the new medium could be properly activated. When Kagrenac struck the heart, whatever happened, it didn't result in the controlled transformation he had envisioned. The new medium stood in its chamber, incomplete or improperly initialized, a brass god without the divine spark it was meant to house. The story doesn't end there, however. The new medium's existence and power would reverberate through history long after the Dwemer disappeared. During the Second Era, Tiber Septim, not yet Emperor, still just the General Tiber Septim, learned of the new medium's existence. He understood, perhaps better than most, that whoever controlled such a construct would be unstoppable. Through a combination of force, diplomacy, and manipulation, he obtained the Numidium from the tribunal of Morrowind, the three living gods who had themselves used the heart's power to achieve divinity after the Dwemer vanished. But there was a problem. The Numidium required a power source of divine magnitude to function, and the tribunal controlled access to the heart. Tiber Septim found an alternative in the Mantella, an enchanted gemstone created by the Underking that could serve as a substitute power source. With this, he activated the Numidium during his conquest of the Somerset Isles, using it to crush resistance and complete his empire. The accounts of the Numidium in action are terrifying. When activated, the brass god didn't just fight. It denied reality itself. Some reports claim that it could unmake things with a gesture, that its mere presence caused time to flow incorrectly, that those who stood against it were not killed, but retroactively removed from existence. The Numidium operated by what scholars call refusal. It simply rejected the reality around it and imposed its own. This power came at a cost. The Numidium's activation during the Tiber Wars caused what's known as the Warp in the West, a reality-breaking event where multiple contradictory timelines somehow all became true simultaneously. The brass god's influence on reality was so profound that it damaged the very fabric of causality in the Iliac Bay region, causing events that could not logically coexist to all be recorded as historical fact. After Tiber Septim's death, the Numidium was supposedly destroyed, broken down into pieces and scattered. But something that powerful, something that was designed to be a god, doesn't die easily. The very concept of the Numidium persists in Tamriel's historical consciousness, a reminder that the Dwemer came terrifyingly close to achieving what they sought. The irony is profound. The Numidium, designed to house the collective divine consciousness of the Dwemer, instead became a tool of conquest for a human emperor. The Dwemer's greatest creation, meant to prove their superiority and achieve transcendence, was ultimately used by the very kind of people they considered inferior. Kagrenac's masterwork became a puppet, a weapon wielded by others, its true purpose forever unfulfilled. Some scholars wonder if the Dwemer are somehow still inside the Numidium, trapped in some form we can't perceive. When it was activated with the mantella instead of the heart, did it contain the consciousness of the Dwemer who vanished? Are they, even now, experiencing existence from within their brass god, unable to communicate or escape? Or was the Numidium empty all along, a hollow vessel that never received the divine spark it was designed to contain? The Numidium represents both the apex of Dwemer achievement and the futility of their ambition. They built a machine capable of challenging gods, of denying reality itself, of imposing will upon the fundamental fabric of existence, and yet, in the end, they never got to use it for its intended purpose. It stands as a monument to ambition unfulfilled, to plans that failed at the moment of their culmination, to a people who reached for godhood and grasped only absence. Chapter 10. The War of the First Council. The peace between the Dwemer and the Chimer could not last. How could it? On one side stood a people devoted to logic, reason, and the pursuit of empirical knowledge, who rejected the very concept of divine authority. On the other stood a deeply spiritual people who had left their homeland specifically for religious freedom, who found meaning and purpose in their worship of the Daedric princes. The First Council, the alliance between these fundamentally incompatible worldviews, was always a temporary arrangement, held together more by external threats than internal harmony. The breaking point came with the discovery of what Kagrenac was doing beneath Red Mountain. Vorin Dagoth of House Dagoth served as Nerevar's most trusted advisor and friend. When the First Council was formed, Dagoth was given a crucial responsibility: guarding the approach to Red Mountain, ensuring the security of both peoples in the region. This position gave him unusual access to Dwemer activities, and what he discovered there filled him with horror. The Dwemer weren't merely studying the heart of Lorcan, they were planning to use it. Kagrenac had developed tools specifically designed to manipulate the heart's power, and he was constructing something called the Numidium to house the results of his work. To Dagoth, and through him to Nerevar and the Chimere people, this was more than arrogance. It was blasphemy of the most profound kind, a violation of cosmic order that could not be tolerated. Nerevar confronted Dumak Dwarf King, his friend and ally, presenting the evidence Dagoth had gathered. The accounts of what happened next vary depending on who recorded them. Chimere sources claim Dumar feigned ignorance, but was clearly complicit, that he stalled and made excuses while Kagrenac continued his work. Some Dwemer records that survived suggest Dumar may have genuinely not known the full extent of Kagrenac's plans, or that he believed in the Dwemer's right to pursue whatever research they deemed necessary. What's clear is that neither side could compromise on this issue. To the Chimere, allowing the Dwemer to continue would be accepting an offense against the divine order itself. To the Dwemer, being told to cease their research by those they considered superstitious was both insulting and unacceptable. The First Council collapsed not from external pressure but from internal contradiction, from the inevitable collision of worldviews that could never truly coexist. Nerevar gathered the great houses of the Khmer. He was joined by his council, Vivek, Almalexia, Sotha-Sil, and Vorin Dagoth, individuals who would later become known as the Tribunal and Dagoth-Ur. Together, they led the Khmer armies toward Red Mountain, determined to stop whatever the Dwemer were doing, by force if necessary. The Dwemer, for their part, mobilized their own forces, their constructs, centurions, spheres, spiders, marched alongside Dwemer warriors equipped with advanced weaponry and armor. The conflict that followed would become known as the War of the First Council, though in truth, it was less a war than a neat series of battles culminating in a single apocalyptic confrontation. The Khmer had numbers and divine favor. Their warriors were blessed by the Daedric princes, particularly Azura, who took personal interest in stopping the Dwemer's blasphemy. The Dwemer had technology and defensive advantages, fighting from fortified positions with the support of tireless constructs that required neither food nor sleep. The battles were brutal. Khmer forces pushed toward Red Mountain through narrow passes and underground tunnels, facing devastating resistance from Dwemer defensive positions. Centurions held choke points that should have fallen to superior numbers. Tonal resonators created zones of confusion and terror, turning Khmer advances into panicked retreats. The Dwemer's understanding of the territory, the underground networks, the defensible positions, the places where their machinery could be most effectively deployed, gave them significant advantages. But the Khmer were fighting for their gods, and that faith gave them strength to push forward, despite horrific losses. Every tunnel taken, every position captured, brought them closer to Red Mountain and the chamber where the heart was kept. The Dwemer fell back, consolidating their defenses, buying time for Kagrenac to complete his work. As the war intensified, so did Kagrenac's urgency. He knew time was running out. The Khmer would eventually breach the final defenses, would reach the heart chamber, would try to stop his work. His calculations weren't quite complete, his tools not perfectly refined, but the moment had come regardless. He would have to attempt the transformation with whatever preparations he'd managed, trusting in his understanding of Tonal architecture to make up for the lack of perfect conditions. In the final battle, the details become confused and contradictory. Khmer accounts speak of a desperate assault on Red Mountain, of fighting through wave after wave of Dwemer defenders, of finally breaching the chamber where the heart was kept. They describe seeing Kagrenac standing before the heart with his tools, seeing him strike it with sunder even as Nerevar's forces poured into the room. Some versions claim Nerevar himself confronted Dwemer in single combat, that the two former friends fought amid the chaos while Kagrenac worked frantically at the heart. Other accounts suggest Dwemer died in the tunnels leading to the chamber, never seeing the moment when everything changed. What every account agrees on is this: in the heart chamber, in the heat of desperate battle, with Khmer forces pushing into the room and all seeming lost for the Dwemer, Kagrenac struck the heart of Lorcan with sunder. The tone rang out, clear and terrible, resonating not just through the chamber, but through reality itself. Keening came next, shaping and refining that tone, bending it toward the specific frequencies calculated to achieve transformation. And then every Dwemer in existence disappeared, not just those in the chamber, not just those in Red Mountain. Every single Dwemer throughout all of Morrowind, Skyrim, High Rock, and Hammerfell. Everyone in every city, every outpost, every remote mining camp vanished in the same instant. The Chimera warriors who had been locked in combat with Dwemer soldiers found themselves fighting empty air. Kagrenac himself, standing before the heart with his tools, simply ceased to be there. The constructs, however, continued operating. Without their masters to command them, they defaulted to their base programming: defend the ruins, patrol the corridors, attack intruders. The machinery kept running, the lights stayed on. But of the Dwemer themselves, no trace remained except ash piles that some claim were left where they stood, though even this is disputed. The Chimera forces stood in stunned silence, trying to comprehend what had just happened. They had come to stop a blasphemy, and in a sense, they had, but not through victory in battle. The Dwemer were simply gone, removed from existence by their own actions at the moment of their greatest experiment. Nerevar and his council approached the heart, still beating, still radiating power, now unguarded. The tools, Keening, Sunder, and Wraithguard, lay where Kagrenac had dropped them. The war was over, but not because anyone had won. It ended because one side had vanished from the world entirely. What Nerevar did next, what his council did with the heart and the tools, would lead to the transformation of the Chimera into the Dunmer and the rise of the Tribunal as living gods. But that's another story, one that deals with the aftermath of Dwemer disappearance, rather than the disappearance itself. The War of the First Council thus ended not with victory or defeat, but with mystery. The Dwemer had sought to transcend mortality through mastery of tonal manipulation and the power of the heart. Whether they succeeded, whether they were destroyed, whether they achieved something stranger than either success or failure, no one could say for certain. All that remained was absence, empty cities, and questions that would echo through the ages. Chapter 11. 11. The disappearance. Theories and evidence. The disappearance of the Dwemer is perhaps the greatest unsolved mystery in all of Tamriel's history. An entire race, tens of thousands of individuals spread across an entire continent, vanished simultaneously in a single moment during the year 700 of the First Era. No bodies, no remains, just emptiness where a civilization had stood. What happened to them? Scholars have debated this question for over 4,000 years, and still no consensus exists. We have theories, speculation, fragments of evidence, but nothing approaching certainty. Let's examine what we know and what scholars believe might have occurred. First, the basic facts that aren't in dispute. The Dwemer vanished at the exact moment Kagrenac struck the heart of Lorcan with his tools. This timing cannot be coincidental. Whatever happened was directly connected to that action, to the tones Kagrenac produced, to the manipulation of divine power he attempted. The disappearance was simultaneous across all Dwemer populations, suggesting a connection that transcended physical distance, perhaps a tonal resonance that affected all Dwemer, regardless of location. Only one Dwemer survived, Yagrum Bagan, a master crafter and tonal architect who served under Kagrenac himself. But Bagan was not on Mundus when the disappearance occurred. He was in an outer realm, essentially another dimension, on some kind of research expedition or mission. When he returned, he found himself the last of his kind, surrounded by the empty cities of his people. This survival is crucial. It suggests that whatever happened was limited to Mundus itself. The Dwemer who weren't present on the mortal plane at that exact moment were spared whatever fate befell their kin. The most straightforward reading of events suggests that Kagrenac's experiment succeeded, but not as intended. Instead of achieving controlled transcendence, elevating the Dwemer to divine status within the Numidium, something went catastrophically wrong. The tones were incorrect, the calculations flawed, and instead of transcendence, the entire race was destroyed. Not killed, but unmade, removed from existence itself so completely that not even bodies remained. The nature of tonal manipulation supports this interpretation. Working with cosmic frequencies demands absolute precision. Even a minor miscalculation could have devastating results. If Kagrenac struck the heart with even slightly incorrect tones, the resonance could have propagated through whatever tonal connection all Dwemer shared, perhaps through their very souls or essence, and unraveled them at a fundamental level. The war's pressure may have forced Kagrenac to act before his preparations were complete, a rushed execution of calculations that demanded perfection. A related interpretation proposes that the Dwemer weren't destroyed, but transformed into something we can't perceive or interact with. Perhaps Kagrenac's work did elevate them beyond mortality, but the transformation was so complete that they exist in a state incomprehensible to mortals. They might be around us still, observing, but unable or unwilling to interact, existing on a plane of reality we simply cannot access. This reading would explain the complete absence of remains. They didn't die. They changed into something that left nothing physical behind. This view remains popular among certain mystically inclined scholars, though it resists any form of empirical verification. The Numidium theory offers another angle. Perhaps the Dwemer were absorbed into the brass god itself, becoming the collective consciousness that it was designed to house. In this scenario, every Dwemer who vanished is somehow present within the Numidium, experiencing existence from within their greatest creation, but unable to communicate or manifest outside of it. When Tiber Septim activated the Numidium during the Second Era, was he essentially puppeting the collective consciousness of the Dwemer, forcing them to serve purposes they would have despised? This interpretation is compelling, but essentially impossible to verify, given the Numidium's current state. A darker reading, favored by some theologians, holds that the Dwemer were claimed by Sithis or by some other cosmic force. In tampering with the heart of Lorcan, they may have violated fundamental laws governing reality, and the universe itself corrected the violation by removing them. Some theologians argue that the Daedric princes, particularly those opposed to the Dwemer's arrogance, might have intervened at that moment, seizing the opportunity provided by Kagrenac's manipulation of the heart to erase the entire race. Direct Daedric intervention on this scale would be unprecedented, however, and seems inconsistent with how the princes typically operate within the constraints of Mundus. Azura, in particular, had reason to act against the Dwemer. As patron of the Chimera, the Dwemer's mockery of divine worship and their attempted use of the heart would have been deeply offensive to her. The curse she later placed on the Chimera, transforming them into the Dunmer, demonstrates her willingness to act decisively and dramatically. Could she have done something similar to the Dwemer at the moment of their greatest blasphemy? While some theologians support this view, others note that Azura's curse on the Chimera was clearly her work, while the Dwemer disappearance has no such clear divine signature, no proclamation, no warning, just sudden absence. Yagram Bagan himself has opinions, though even he admits uncertainty. In his conversations with scholars, recorded in various sources, he expresses belief that Kagrenac's theories were sound, but that something went wrong in execution. He speculates that the sudden nature of the war, the desperation of that final moment, may have forced Kagrenac to act before he was truly ready. The tools might not have been perfectly attuned, the calculations not quite complete, and that margin of error proved catastrophic. Bagan also notes that he never fully understood all of Kagrenac's theories. Divine metaphysics contained concepts that even a master tonal architect struggled to grasp completely. It's possible that Kagrenac himself didn't fully understand all the implications of what he was attempting, that there were variables he failed to account for, consequences he didn't foresee. An intriguing piece of evidence comes from the ash piles found in some Dwemer ruins. In certain locations, particularly around Red Mountain, piles of ash can be found that some scholars read as all that remains of the Dwemer physically. If this interpretation holds, it points toward a kind of instant incineration or molecular breakdown, though why only some locations would have these ash piles while others show no physical trace whatsoever remains puzzling. Other researchers dispute this reading entirely, arguing the ash could be from other sources or much later events. The volcanic activity around Red Mountain certainly provides alternative explanations. The former, the enslaved snow elves who lived among the Dwemer, did not disappear. This fact stands out as particularly significant. Whatever happened affected only the Dwemer themselves, not other races living in their cities. This pattern points toward the effect being specific to Dwemer physiology, soul structure, or perhaps to some tonal signature unique to their race. The mechanism of disappearance targeted Dwemer with precision that excluded everyone else, though how such precise targeting could occur remains unexplained by any current theory. There's also the question of what happened to Dwemer's souls. In Tamriel, when mortals die, their souls typically go to various afterlives. Sovngarde for Nord heroes, the Dreamsleeve for recycling, realms of Daedric princes for their worshippers, or absorption by soul gems. But Dwemer's souls simply vanished along with their bodies. This complete absence from the afterlife points toward something more profound than death occurring, though what exactly remains hotly debated among both theologians, and arcane philosophers. Some mystically inclined scholars propose that the Dwemer achieved a state called zero-sum, a concept in certain esoteric philosophies where an individual realizes they are part of the cosmic dream, but fails to maintain their sense of self in the face of that realization, causing them to simply cease to exist. Could Kagrenac's manipulation of the heart have forced the entire Dwemer race into sudden enlightenment, and in that moment of cosmic awareness, they lost themselves and winked out of existence? This reading is philosophically interesting, but essentially impossible to prove or disprove. By its very nature, successful zero-sum leaves no evidence behind. The Elder Scrolls themselves contain references to the Dwemer disappearance, but as with all things involving the Elder Scrolls, interpretation is difficult. Those few who have read passages relating to the event report contradictory visions, multiple possibilities, timelines where different things occurred. The Elder Scrolls seem to suggest that even from the perspective of objects that exist outside normal time, the Dwemer's fate is uncertain, somehow indeterminate. Another line of inquiry worth considering holds that the Dwemer weren't destroyed or transformed, but removed to somewhere else entirely. Not another dimension, like the outer realm where Bagan was, but perhaps somewhere outside the Orbis entirely, beyond the reach of all cosmic forces. They might exist now in some place where the rules of Mundus don't apply, continuing their research and development, completely cut off from the world they left behind. In this reading, the disappearance was intentional, a kind of ultimate escape from a reality they found limiting. This interpretation struggles to explain why they would abandon everything they built, however, and why Yagrum Bagan would be excluded from such a carefully planned exodus. The continued functioning of Dwemer constructs and machinery offers another angle of investigation. These devices still work thousands of years later, still respond to Dwemer materials and tools, still follow their original programming with unwavering consistency. One could read this as evidence that the Dwemer had been completely destroyed. Surely their creations would have failed as well, would have lost whatever connection animated them. The fact that they persist might suggest their creators persist as well, in some form, somewhere. Then again, the construct's continued function could simply demonstrate Dwemer engineering excellence without necessarily implying anything about their creator's fate. Machines designed to operate indefinitely will do exactly that, regardless of what happened to those who built them. Various expeditions to Dwemer ruins have reported strange phenomena that some interpret as relating to the disappearance. Unusual sounds in the deep places, tonal frequencies that seem to produce psychological effects, mechanical devices that activate without apparent cause. Some delvers claim to have heard voices speaking in Dwemeris, though recordings of these events show only static or undefined noise. Are these echoes of the disappeared Dwemer somehow trapped in their ruins? Or do the mind's pattern-seeking tendencies create phantom meanings in the eerie atmosphere of abandoned cities? The academic community remains divided, with most scholars attributing such reports to psychological factors rather than genuine supernatural phenomena, though a minority maintain that dismissing all such accounts is premature. Ultimately, we may never know with certainty what happened to the Dwemer. The very nature of their disappearance, complete, simultaneous, without trace, makes investigation extraordinarily difficult. We're trying to understand an event that removed all direct evidence of itself, that left only absence as testimony. It's like trying to study a whole, to understand something, by examining what it isn't rather than what it is. What we can say with certainty is this: the Dwemer reached for something that no other mortal race has dared to attempt. They tried to use empirical understanding and technological mastery to achieve what others sought through worship or mystical enlightenment. They built tools to manipulate the heart of a god, created a brass titan to house their ascended consciousness, and attempted to remake themselves through application of tonal science. And then, in an instant, they were gone. Whether they succeeded beyond our ability to perceive, failed catastrophically, or achieved something stranger that defies our categories of success and failure, the result was the same: an empty civilization, still functioning machines, and a mystery that has resisted 4,000 years of inquiry. The Dwemer vanished. That much stands as incontrovertible fact. Everything else, the how, the why, the where, is interpretation, conjecture, and educated guesses built on fragments of evidence and the testimonies of one sick, lonely survivor who wasn't even present when it occurred. Chapter 12. Legacy and Yagrum Bagan, the last Dwemer. In the ruins of a corpusarium beneath Tel Fir, tended by the wizard Divaith Fir, lives Yagrum Bagan, the last living Dwemer in all of Tamriel, perhaps in all of existence. His survival is accidental, his life a tragedy, his knowledge invaluable and yet insufficient to solve the greatest mystery of his people. Yagrum Bagan was once a master crafter and tonal architect serving under Kagrenac himself. He worked on the tools, possibly on the Numidium, and was deeply involved in the theoretical research underlying Kagrenac's grand plan. But when the moment of disappearance came, Bagan was not on Mundus. He was visiting an outer realm, a dimension beyond the mortal plane, on business whose exact nature he never fully explained. When he returned, everything had changed. His people were gone. His civilization was empty. He was alone. But Bagan's suffering didn't end with loneliness. At some point in his long existence, after the disappearance, he contracted corpus, a disease created by Dagoth Ur that causes both mental and physical degeneration. The disease is normally fatal and horrible, causing victims to lose their minds while their bodies bloat and mutate grotesquely. Bagan survived, but at a terrible cost. His legs became too diseased and swollen to support his weight. His body bloated to immense size. Only his mind remained relatively intact, protected perhaps by his Dwemer nature or by interventions from Divaith Fir. When encountered by adventurers and scholars during the events of the Third Era, Bagan spends his days suspended in a mechanical harness of his own design, one of the last examples of Dwemer engineering created after the disappearance. He is lonely, diseased, the last of his kind, living among people who regard his race as myth or ancient history. He is a living fossil, the final remnant of a civilization that thought itself superior to all others and vanished in pursuit of transcendence. Bagan's knowledge is extensive but incomplete. He studied under Kagrenac, understood tonal architecture, worked on the projects that led to the disappearance. Yet he cannot explain what happened. He wasn't there. He didn't witness the final moment. His theories are educated guesses, speculation by someone who understands the science involved but missed the actual event. He is the world's foremost expert on the Dwemer, and yet the most important question, what happened to them, remains beyond his ability to answer definitively. Through Bagan, scholars have learned much about Dwemer culture, technology, and philosophy. His translations have helped decode Dwemerist texts. His explanations of tonal theory have advanced understanding of how the Dwemer viewed reality. His accounts of daily life in Dwemer cities provide details no ruin could preserve. He is a primary source for a civilization that left no other living witnesses. Yet Bagan is also deeply tragic. He survives not through any plan or desire, but through accident. He lives on not in triumph, but in isolation. His body ravaged by disease, his mind filled with knowledge that becomes increasingly irrelevant as time passes. The world has moved on from the Dwemer. Their ruins are plundered by adventurers seeking treasure. Their technology is studied but not understood, imitated but not replicated. The questions his people work to answer, questions about the nature of reality, about transcending mortality, about achieving divinity through understanding, are no longer being pursued in the way the Dwemer pursued them. The legacy of the Dwemer extends far beyond one diseased survivor, however. Their ruins dot the landscape of northern Tamriel, permanent fixtures that have become integrated into the region's geography. Cities are built above Dwemer ruins. Mines break into Dwemer tunnels. Adventurers and scholars constantly delve into these ancient places, seeking artifacts, knowledge, or simply treasure. Dwemer technology remains highly prized. Dwemer metal is stronger and lighter than any modern alloy, and while it can be melted down and reworked, the secret of its original creation is lost. Dwemer constructs, when captured or salvaged, are studied extensively, though no one has successfully created new ones. Even simple Dwemer gears and cogs are valuable, not just for their material, but for their precision manufacturing. The quest to understand Dwemer technology has consumed entire careers. Calcelmo of Markarth has spent decades studying Dwemer artifacts and ruins, attempting to decode their language and understand their engineering. He's made progress, translating significant portions of Dwemerus and documenting countless artifacts. Yet even he acknowledges the fundamental principles of Dwemer science remain beyond modern understanding. The gap between Dwemer achievement and current knowledge is simply too vast to bridge quickly. Various groups and individuals have attempted to locate and use Dwemer artifacts for their own purposes. The Synod and College of Whispers both maintain research programs focused on Dwemer technology. The Thieves Guild regularly plunders Dwemer ruins for valuable artifacts. The Dawn Guard, during their conflict with vampires in the Fourth Era, made extensive use of Dwemer crossbow technology they discovered and adapted. The intellectual legacy of the Dwemer is more complex. Their philosophy, placing reason and empirical knowledge above faith and tradition, influenced later thinkers, though few would acknowledge the Dwemer as their inspiration. The idea that mortals could rival gods through understanding and technology rather than through worship has appeared in various forms throughout Tamriel's history. Alchemists, enchanters, and scholars of the magical arts all pursue in their own ways the same goal the Dwemer sought: mastery over the forces that shape reality. Tonal architecture, however, remains largely lost. No modern practitioner has achieved anything approaching Dwemer mastery of tonal manipulation. The Thuum persists among the Nords, and some scholars recognize its connection to tonal principles, but it's wielded through tradition and training rather than scientific understanding. The Sijic order may possess some knowledge of tonal manipulation, but if so, they guard it jealously and make no use of it publicly. The story of the Dwemer has also become cautionary. In many retellings, particularly among religious traditions, the Dwemers serve as an example of the dangers of hubris, of what happens when mortals try to place themselves above or equal to the divine. The Tribunal Temple in Morrowind particularly emphasized this interpretation. The Dwemer, in their arrogance, attempted to usurp divine power and were destroyed for it. That this narrative was promoted by living gods, who themselves had used the heart of Lorcan to achieve divinity, is an irony apparently lost on the temple's theologians. To the common people of Tamriel, the Dwemer have become almost mythical. Dwarven ruins are adventure sites, dangerous but potentially profitable. Dwarven artifacts are valuable curiosities or useful tools, disconnected from any understanding of the civilization that created them. The actual history, the philosophy, the ambitions, the systematic pursuit of transcendence through empirical means is lost on most people, who know only that dwarves existed long ago, built things underground, and mysteriously disappeared. The ruins themselves continue to pose dangers. Dwemer constructs still patrol the corridors, still attack intruders, still follow programming established thousands of years ago. Traps still function. In some ruins, tonal resonators still emit frequencies that can induce terror or confusion in delvers. The former, devolved descendants of the Snow Elves, have claimed many Dwemer ruins as their own territory, adding biological danger to mechanical hazards. Blackreach remains the crown jewel of Dwemer achievement, a wonder that still astonishes those who discover it. Standing in that vast cavern, beneath the glow of artificial stars, surrounded by the architecture of a lost civilization, it's impossible not to feel the weight of what the Dwemer accomplished. They created an entire world beneath the world, a realm that operates by principles they mastered and we barely comprehend. And they did it without divine guidance, without magical tradition passed down from gods, purely through observation, experimentation, and relentless pursuit of understanding. For scholars and philosophers, the Dwemer represent a path not taken by other civilizations. What if the Altmer had embraced reason over tradition? What if the Imperials had prioritized scientific inquiry over military expansion? What if any of Tamriel's races had followed the Dwemer's example of seeking transcendence through understanding rather than worship? Would they have succeeded where the Dwemer apparently failed? Or would they too have vanished, removed from existence in pursuit of something beyond mortal reach? The disappearance itself has become a kind of secular apocalypse myth, an entire civilization gone in an instant, leaving only their works behind. It speaks to fears about progress without wisdom, about the dangers of seeking power without understanding consequences, about what happens when ambition exceeds ability. Every delver who enters a Dwemer ruin walks through a tomb of unprecedented scale, a necropolis where no bodies lie because there was nothing left to bury. Yagrum Bagan, the last Dwemer, serves as both a bridge to that lost civilization and a reminder of its mortality. Through him, the Dwemer remain tenuously connected to the present, a living link to a vanished people. But Bagan is old, sick, sustained by magic and mechanical support in ways the Dwemer never intended. When he finally dies, as even he must eventually, that connection will be severed. The Dwemer will pass from living memory into pure history, from a people who existed to a people who are merely studied. Unless, of course, the Dwemer aren't truly gone. Unless they exist somewhere, in some form, transformed by Kagrenac's final work into something we cannot perceive or comprehend. In that case, they might be watching us still, observing as lesser races fumble with the remnants of their civilization, perhaps amused or perhaps horrified by what has become of the world they left behind. The Dwemer's greatest achievement was not any single invention or construction. It was the consistent application of reason to every problem, the refusal to accept mystery as an excuse to stop investigating, the determination to understand reality on its most fundamental level. They looked at a world shaped by gods and said, "We can comprehend this, we can master this, we can become greater than this." And whether they succeeded or failed, that ambition itself was unprecedented. Their greatest failure, if we can call it that, was perhaps their inability to recognize limits. The cosmos has rules, laws, forces that may not be safely manipulated, regardless of understanding. The Dwemer, in their certainty that sufficient knowledge could overcome any obstacle, may have attempted something that simply should not be done. Not because it was morally wrong, but because reality itself has boundaries that cannot be transgressed without catastrophic consequences. Or perhaps their failure was one of timing and circumstance. Perhaps Kagrenac's theories were sound, his calculations correct, but the pressure of war forced him to act before he was truly ready. Perhaps with another year, another month, another day of refinement, the transformation would have worked as intended. We'll never know. The moment passed, the tools struck the heart, and reality was altered in ways we're still trying to understand. The Dwemer's legacy is thus paradoxical. They achieved more than any other civilization in recorded history in terms of technological sophistication. They built structures that have lasted longer than most nations. They discovered principles of reality that remain beyond modern understanding. And yet, in the end, they failed at their ultimate goal. They sought transcendence and found only absence. They reached for divinity and grasped emptiness. But perhaps absence itself is a kind of transcendence. Perhaps the Dwemer achieved exactly what they sought, and it simply looks like disappearance from our limited perspective. Perhaps they exist now in a state so elevated, so removed from mortal reality, that they appear to us as nothing at all. It would be fitting, in a way. A people who rejected the gods as they were known might become gods of such a different type that mortals cannot perceive them. Then again, this could be wishful thinking, a comforting interpretation rather than established fact, the human need to find meaning in mystery rather than accepting that some questions may have no satisfying answers. These questions will likely never be answered with certainty. The Dwemer remain mysterious precisely because mystery was what they left behind. A people devoted to eliminating mystery from the universe became the greatest mystery the universe contains. And in the empty halls of their cities, beneath the artificial stars of Black Reach, in the rust-proof mechanisms of constructs that will outlast civilizations yet unborn, their legacy persists, not as answers, but as questions that echo through the ages, asking every generation, what are the limits of understanding? Can mortality be transcended through knowledge alone? And what price are we willing to pay to find out? Conclusion: echoes in the dark. And so we return to where we began, Dreamer, standing at the threshold of empty halls where steam still hisses through pipes that were old when your ancestors were young. The Dwemer are gone. That much we know with certainty. Everything else, where they went, whether they succeeded or failed, whether they still exist in some form beyond our comprehension, remains shrouded in the very mystery they spent their entire civilization trying to eliminate from the universe. They were a people like no other Tamriel has seen. While other races looked to the heavens and found gods to worship, the Dwemer looked inward and found only themselves, their reason, their capacity for understanding. They rejected divine authority, not from malice, but from principle, believing that beings of power did not inherently deserve worship or obedience. They built their civilization on logic, mathematics, empirical observation, and the relentless pursuit of knowledge, creating marvels that remain functional thousands of years after their disappearance. From their first settlement beneath the volcanic slopes of Red Mountain to the vast expanse of Black Reach, from the smallest centurion spider to the towering horror of the Numidium, the Dwemer demonstrated what mortals could achieve when they refused to accept limitations. They mastered steam power, created self-maintaining machines, discovered the principles of tonal architecture, and ultimately attempted to manipulate the heart of a god to achieve transcendence. And then, in a single moment, when Kagrenac struck the heart of Lorcan with sunder, they vanished. Every Dwemer throughout northern Tamriel simply ceased to be present, leaving behind only their works, their one diseased survivor, and questions that 4,000 years have not been sufficient to answer. Their ruins remain, scattered across Tamriel like monuments to ambition and mystery. Adventurers delve into these ruins, seeking treasure and knowledge. Scholars study them, attempting to reconstruct understanding that was lost. And the machines continue their eternal patrol, following programming established by creators who will never return to relieve them of duty or assign them new tasks. The story of the Dwemer is ultimately a story about the relationship between knowledge and transcendence, between understanding and existence, between mortality and divinity. They believed, perhaps correctly, that gods were simply beings of greater power, that through sufficient advancement, mortals could achieve the same heights. They pursued this belief to its ultimate conclusion, willing to risk everything on the possibility of becoming something greater. Whether they succeeded is a question that may never have a definitive answer. Did they achieve the divine skin they sought, transforming into something so elevated that they appear as absence to mortal perception? Were they destroyed by miscalculation, their entire race unmade by tones just slightly wrong? Did they anger forces that should not be angered, earning the enmity of gods who erased them from existence? Or did something stranger occur, something that defies our categories of success and failure, transformation and destruction? The only living witness, Yagrum Bagan, doesn't know. He wasn't there. He studied under Kagrenac, understood the theories, worked on the tools, but he was in another dimension when the crucial moment came. His knowledge is vast but incomplete, his theories educated but uncertain. He is the last Dwemer, and even he cannot tell us what happened to his people. What we can say is that the Dwemer left a legacy that extends far beyond their physical works. They demonstrated that mortals could achieve incredible things through reason and determination alone. They proved that divine favor was not necessary for greatness, that worship was not required for accomplishment. They showed that the universe could be studied, understood, and manipulated according to principles that could be learned and applied. But they also demonstrated, perhaps, that some boundaries should not be crossed, that some knowledge comes at too high a price, that reality itself may have limits that cannot be safely transgressed, regardless of understanding. Their disappearance serves as both inspiration and warning, proof of what mortals can achieve, and reminder of what might happen when ambition exceeds wisdom. In the deep places beneath Tamriel, their cities wait. Blackreach glows with artificial stars. Centurions patrol corridors their creators will never walk. Pipes carry steam to mechanisms that serve no purpose except continuation. And somewhere in those ruins, in the spaces between the machinery and the silence, the question persists: what happened to the Dwemer? Perhaps one day, someone will discover the answer. Perhaps a scholar will translate the final passage in a Dwemer text that explains everything. Perhaps an adventurer will find a mechanism that shows what occurred. Perhaps Yagrum Bagan will remember some crucial detail he's forgotten. Or perhaps the answer lies in the heart of Lorcan itself, in tones that cannot be safely heard, in knowledge that cannot be safely known. Until that day, if it ever comes, the Dwemer remain what they have been for 4,000 years. The greatest mystery in Tamriel's history, a civilization that reached for the impossible and either grasped it or fell into the void, trying. They were the deep folk, the people of reason, the engineers who tried to remake reality itself. They were brilliant, arrogant, cruel, and visionary. They achieved wonders and committed atrocities. They built things that will outlast civilizations, yet unborn, and pursued knowledge at any cost. And then they were gone, leaving behind only echoes in the dark, steam hissing through ancient pipes, and the steady mechanical footsteps of constructs still following orders from masters who vanished before completing their greatest work. The Dwemer are gone. Long live the mystery of the Dwemer. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of Tamriel's greatest mysteries, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are countless other stories waiting to be told. Tales of the tribunal's rise and fall, the truth about Dagoth-Ur, the secrets of the Sijic Order, the history of the Thu'um, and so many more. Each week, we descend into the lore of the Elder Scrolls universe, exploring the stories, characters, and mysteries that make this world so rich. What mysteries should we explore next? Let me know in the comments below. And until next time, may your path be clear and your blade be sharp. Remember, in the deep places, the machines still walk, and the echoes of a vanished people still resonate through halls that refuse to crumble. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Dwemer history. Now go forth and explore those ruins with new understanding of what they once were and what mysteries they still contain. Stay curious, dreamer. The world is full of secrets waiting to be uncovered.